Well, I was correct in my presumption based on logic and prior experience and extrapolation from prior experience. The eyeball, the naked eyeball, is the most important area of the physiology to bathe while immersed in a bath of silver hydroperoxide with salt and MSM and a trace amount of silica. It is so important, and it is true, my assessment, that the eyeball is connected to the adrenal glands, but it's probably connected to the adrenal glands via the pineal gland, of all things. How could I be so stupid in overlooking the pineal gland? Because we know the eyeball is an extension of the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is linked, very closely associated with the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is the master gland of all of the glands. Oh, of course. The eyeball is linked to the adrenal gland. Just not the way I thought, to the exclusion of the other glands. So when we bathe the body, Becker focused on the skin because he knew the skin could create stem cells by virtue of the fact that if you have silver ions in the vicinity of the growth layer at the far underside of the skin where the skin grows, if you have silver ions there during the formation of collagen, the collagen has the opportunity, no guarantee, but the opportunity to turn into stem cells, which is a big improvement over not having the opportunity to turn into stem cells. And so this increases our chances for rejuvenating the entire physiology. But it's not enough, is what I've discovered. And so I kept wondering, well, what am I overlooking, The glands, the endocrine glands. And they are rejuvenated by rejuvenating the eyeball. But to rejuvenate the eyeball, you have to open your eyes. So you can't have too much hydrogen peroxide, such that you can't open your eyes. And at first your eyes will sting, but you haven't overdone the silver hydroperoxide if the stinging goes away. You have overdone it if the stinging does not go away. But if it goes away, then it's due probably entirely to the salt, which, we can get over. It's just like you go to the beach, your eyes sting at first. But the silver's there, and if it's there in just the right amount, it's unbelievable. It's uncanny what a difference it makes. Now, how much time we spend with our eyeball exposed to the bath water? Obviously, the longer the better. I'm just starting out, so I'm limiting myself. I'm not overdoing it. I'm sorry. I'm peeling dead skin off the bottom of my heels. It's itching. I would like to think, I can take it up longer and longer, but there may be a limit to how long we have to do it. We may not have to do it for very long. The body, the skin, has its limits in how quickly does it respond to the absorption of all these neat ingredients that are in the bathwater, but the eyeball may be immediate in its response. And so if our skin reacted, in other words, if our skin responded in the same manner that our eyeball responds, we wouldn't have to, I wouldn't have to spend so much time in the bath, 45 minutes minimum. I'd spend 5, 10, 15 at the max, because I'm really not opening up my eyes total time that much duration. And I take breaks. I don't try to open them, all at once in one long session. But it sure does make a difference. It's phenomenal what it does to. I can feel what effect it has on the adrenals because it's facing reality. And what's the reality? The reality is, in the Kali Yuga, we spend all of our energy pursuing our desires, pursuing our dharma. Whether or not we actually succeed in fulfilling our dharma, we pursue it. And we do so at the expense of the dharma of the body. The body has its own dharma, and that is to regenerate, so that we can have a long life, a long period of time in which to pursue our dharma, whether or not we actually satisfy our dharma. We'd have more time to pursue it. But the body only has so much energy, and so some of that energy has to go wherever it's directed. And if most of it's directed and consumed by our pursuits, our personal pursuits, then there's very little, if any, energy left over to pursue our dharma. Now, usually, rejuvenation only occurs when we die, and the only time we get to the payoff for that regeneration only occurs if we get reborn, and we usually do get reborn. But the regeneration happens because we're dead. And if that's the best we can do in the Kali Yuga, is to regenerate by way of death, then we're not doing too good. But in order to get away with not having to die in order to regenerate, that means we have to make maybe be best not to use the word sacrifice. Let's say change our priorities, in which instead of spending so much of our attention running around pursuing our desires, spend some of our attention pursuing the desire of the body to regenerate, instead of allowing us the freedom to do as we please, which is mostly to be self-centered and a little narcissistic in just pursuing our desires as if nothing else mattered. Now we assume, obviously, that we can't regenerate, and we'll grow old and die. But that's because we never put our attention on resolving the problem. Dr. Becker, Robert O. Becker, gave us a hint, he gave us the tail end of the dog. We got to figure out the whole dog, and from what he's given us, but at least he's given us something to get started on. So I think what happens when we take his protocol to the next level beyond wound care, to entire treatment of the physiology, to prevent and slow down the ravaging effects of old age, we're shifting our time frame out of the Kali Yuga and into the Treta Yuga. I've had the experience on occasion in which I feel like a little dazed and out of time, out of the normal time frame, and it's pretty hard to put your finger on, okay, then what time frame have I entered into when I exited the other one that I was more familiar with? I don't know. So I can only estimate that it's the time frame that Methuselah lived within, because he lived within the time frame of the Treta Yuga. His physiology functioned along the lines of functionality that the Treta Yuga dictates, or else he wouldn't have lived to be 1,000 years old. It's not a fairy tale. It's a remembrance of what's always latent in the physiology, if we should waken it up. Now, there's one other person we know of in the West, and at any rate Western history, who probably could have lived to be 1,000 years old. But like Enoch, he only lived to be 300, and that was Epimenides. Epimenides. E-P-I-M-E M-E-N-I-D-E-S? I want to say N-I-D-E-S. Epimenides. Anyway, he lived to be 299 years old. And he didn't die of old age. He died because he was executed by his captors because he had a policy. He was a soothsayer. He could foretell your future. But he would only do it if it was favorable. He'd keep his mouth shut if it wasn't. So his captors said, we're going to execute you, tomorrow morning if you don't give us a forecast of our future. And he didn't. So I suspect he was taking on their karma. Because that's what enlightened people do when they die prematurely, not due to old age, is they're dying because they're taking on somebody's karma, somebody else's karma. And this is what I think happened with Socrates. But in the case of Epimenides, he could have lived longer. And he was known for tattoos over his entire body. He had tattoos over his entire... It was unbelievable. Anyway. Now, what did he tattoo his body with? Did he tattoo his body with silver? I don't know. Gave himself Argyria, the only way he knew how. Because they didn't have battery technology in ancient Greece, although they did have it in ancient India. I don't know. In any case, it's one example of somebody who probably could have lived to be 1,000 years old had he been living in more favorable times without the need to take on somebody else's karma and sacrifice his life, make a priority choice. How much good is he doing alive versus dead? Well, apparently more good dead than alive at that point. So, the Treta Yuga is very interesting, and I think that's what Becker has opened up the door, just a peep, just a teeny-weeny peep, for us to peer into that possibility of shifting our physiology into the Treta Yuga, at the very least. I mean, theoretically, we could go all the way back to the Sat Yuga, but I think the Sat Yuga has very high requirements, and one of them is not to be born at all, but to literally have your body manifested by another yogi, who can do those things, who can materialize objects, materialize a body, and it's of a soul who wants to incarnate. Then you might live a little bit more than 1,000 years. You might be capable of greater duration of life. But if you're born, 1,000 years might be the max, more or less, on average, let's say. On average. Barring the extremes, who can be more or less than that. We're less, obviously. But that might be the average of what physiology is capable of when it is born, when it goes through 9 months of gestation. 1,000 years might be the average of what we are capable of if we fulfill all the factors. And one is we have to divert some of our energy, some of our ATP, to something other than the pursuit of our desires. And it could be the endocrine glands that need to be addressed when we want to engage rejuvenating the entire physiology, not merely the skin and wound care that Becker was focusing on. Now, when I was fasting as a teenager, I was still growing, except my energy no longer went into growth while I was fasting. It went into regeneration, and I knew that. And into feeding. I was feeding the endocrine glands while I was starving everything else. And it did give me longer life. Of course, I lost it, all that good karma. I spent it all in pursuit of activism. I took on so much karma from others that I, like Epimenides, I shortened my life. So now I'm the opposite. Instead of being younger than my years, I'm older than my years. But that came later. During the fast, while I was a teenager, I diverted my energy that I would have used for growth so that I didn't mature until I was in my early 20s or mid-20s. What normally would happen at late teens. So I put it off by a few years because of that fast. So I put off development. But instead I used that energy to regenerate the physiology, and apparently it was the glands that needed to be rejuvenated more than anything. I didn't complete the regeneration process of the glands, I know that, but at least I pursued it to some degree. So here I have this protocol, this capacity to regenerate the physiology, and I suspected I wasn't utilizing it fully. And I had no conception that it's the eyeballs that have to be made naked by being uncovered while submersed under the waterline of the bath. And they have to be bathed. The naked eyeball has to be bathed. Whether or not it's going to fix this wary eye, who wants to look the other way and not look dead ahead, I don't know. I noticed that in the earlier photographs of Maharishi Mahesh, he did not have the wandering eye syndrome like I have. He could look forward when he was younger, in the late 50s or very early 60s, when he was still very slender. He just came from India, and he hadn't been here in the West for very long. That came later. So I'm sure it's strain of some kind. I've been straining myself since the mid to late 90s, and it's been nonstop. And I guess you could say it was ever since Charlie and Helen Lutz left LA that my physiology has not been so keen on staying young. I've been burning the candle at both ends, and I never used to do that. And I think now it's finally caught up to me, and I'm paying the price. By doing too much, by doing way too much. So this is a different way to pursue what I did when I was a child, the rejuvenation of the endocrine glands, by rejuvenating the eyeball, by bathing the naked eyeball in salt, MSM, silver hydroperoxide, and a trace amount of silica gel. It's a quite formidable task, and a very important one, to get the ingredients just right, not too much silver hydroperoxide, not too little salt, not too much salt. But it really pays off to get all the ingredients right, and then not have any silicone rubber or plastic in the bath with you. That's probably the only rubber that, so far, that I see, that we must avoid contact with the bath water. So I'm using food-grade plastic straws, which are not silicone. I know they're not. They're probably polypropylene. And I'm using them as my air tube, my breathing tube, while I immerse my face and open up my eyeball and look around. I look around and breathe deeply and slowly. I use 3 straws lined up in a row. So if I bunch it, then the water leaks through my mouth too readily. But if I line it up in a straight line, I'm able to get better closure over them. And I plug my nostrils with 2 fingers, actually these 2 fingers, my middle finger and my thumb. These are the 2 largest ones. I plug up my nose, and I have to angle them, because if I do them straight, it'll leak too much. So I angle them, and any leakage that happens isn't a whole lot. So it works out pretty good. So it's just a question of doing it then, and just feeling comfortable with it. When I feel like I've had enough, then I've had enough. So I spend at least 45 minutes in the bath, and then I spend as much time as I can bathing my bare naked eyeball underwater, and it really makes a difference. And probably it's regenerating my pineal gland to start with, and via that, all the other glands of the physiology. And this is important because the testosterone is created by the gonads, and they have to regenerate in order to offset their degeneration due to circumcision. So in order to get a foreskin to grow, the endocrine glands have to be regenerated. And, I've been wondering how to go about this, because I wasn't getting results just by taking a bath and whatnot. And it's because I didn't understand the eyeball has to be regenerated. Now, I lost my vision. I started to when I was 40. That's 19 years ago. And it was due to the eye strain in front of the computer, nonstop. I had 20/20 vision. It's not slightly better than 20/20. which I could see really good. But it didn't take long using a bad monitor. You know, I had to turn the contrast up all the way and the brightness up all the way. It was a really bad monitor. I should have just bought a new monitor, but I didn't. And I screwed my eyeballs right away. And I knew it. But I was too lazy and dumb to buy a new monitor or a different monitor. So I would spend 16, 20 hours a day on the computer, you know, straight, nonstop, daily, from 1997 onwards. And I could get away with it, you know. I could get away with it. I had a lot of bounce back. So long as I was a pure vegan and I didn't have any roommates to bother me, or I just stayed away from roommates, but stayed pure vegan. I didn't know the importance of taking B12 at the time, but not eat any animal foods for months, years on end. That conserved a lot of energy. But I don't have that physiology anymore, so, you know, I'm having to devote some of my energy to regeneration, and it's quite a trick, quite a mystery to understand how do you, I don't want to say trick the body into rejuvenating itself, but I guess you could. You know, it must be some trick to it, and it's the endocrine glands. They have to be addressed. And it's the eyeball. The eyeball. So in one of my videos, I made the title "Are the eyes the window to the crotch?" And well, by circuitous reroute, yeah, that's the one way to put it. But are the eyes the window to the endocrine glands? That's the way I should have, you know, stated maybe a secondary title to that video, and because that would be more accurate. But I didn't understand, and that was, I think, either this morning or yesterday I composed that title. Now I have a better understanding, yeah, because I'm recalling what I learned as a teenager. You know, this knowledge is kind of tucked away because I never thought I'd be able to do again what I did as a teenager. I thought I was only able that was one chance in a lifetime. Well, yeah, to do it that way. But this is a different way. Yet it's addressing the same problem, the endocrine glands. It's the same problem, rejuvenation of the endocrine glands, or as they can also be known as the ductless glands, I believe is their alternate title, because they don't, they're not like sweat glands. They don't have ducts. They go, I think they duct internally to the bloodstream, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe not. Yeah, to the bloodstream, because the hormones they create get dumped into the bloodstream. So the ducted glands are like the sweat glands, the salivary glands, but they duct exterior to the body, while the so-called ductless glands are ducted, but they duct internally to the bloodstream. So they feed us instead of our salivary glands getting wasted, you know. People spit out their salivation, so they have to create more salivation instead of swallowing it. We sweat, we lose that to evaporation. So those kinds of secretion glands are the ducted glands. The glands that would have been functional had I have a foreskin. For those two glands on the either side of what would have been the frenulum, those are ducted glands because they duct out of the body fluids that are lost. But the ductless, so-called ductless glands simply duct internally, so we don't lose the value of what they create. And so they can evolve into highly specialized glands, and so they become known as the endocrine glands, because they are much more powerful and much more. We're very much dependent on them. Let's put it that way. Okay. Now I'm being told my battery is low, so the minute I hit the OK, I know I'm going to have to close this video, and hopefully I won't lose this video. All right. So let's see if I can close it. No, I got to push the OK.